Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And it is in the seasons, that we find ourselves in different rooms in our life. Maybe that's a good way to explain it. Different rooms in our life. And, I feel that in one way or another, and who's to know how one day plays out in comparison to the next or in comparison to the past, that there is always change going on, right? And it can be uncomfortable, but at the same time, you can look at it like an adventure. You can look at it like an opportunity to try something new, to have a taste of that creativity that you've been putting off to the side, or maybe you've just kind of put it on a shelf in another room just because in the moment it doesn't seem relevant, right? It doesn't seem important. It doesn't feel like it's for you, right? Just to find out that tomorrow that could be just the most important thing that ever came across your path, right? That it's something that was supposed to happen. And I believe that, that's one thing in the past few years that I've come to appreciate. It knows itchy. It's one thing that I've come to appreciate, you know, that my life has been a little bit topsy turvy, right? And a lot of that you can look at as adventure, as excitement. Sometimes you can look at it as destitute and worry and stress, right? But for the most part, in setting goals and in setting dreams, and you guys know I'm big on that, right? It's always a question mark. It's always a question. And because we always want to know what's going on in this moment, but we want to know it yesterday, right? We don't want to step into doo doo where we're unfamiliar, or sometimes even more scarier, something that we're very familiar with, something we're very used to, something we're very comfortable in, and to have that rug ripped out from underneath our feet. I don't know about you guys, but that has happened so many times in my life. And when I say that I ride the waves, that I adapt and conquer, I've come to expect change to come into my life. And I never know whether or not it's going to be good change, whether it's going to be a little bit of doo doo going on that I'm not looking forward to. But whatever it is, we're still here, right? And there'll still be choices within that. And there'll still be opportunities for curiosity and adventure and good times, smiles, right? Possibly also the difficulties, the frustrations, the sadnesses, the grief, right? All that stuff that we prefer not to be in our lives. But if you've been with me for any length of time, you're probably one of those crew in the light and the darkness, or the darkness in their light, touching the light for the very first time. Those are my people. You guys know that I believe that this is a evolutionary process that we're going in. Everybody's trying to kind of mesh the evolutionary in with other aspects and religion and culture, which is a little bit, right? But in reality, it's all about the human in us, right? No movement can be done without us, without starting at ground zero again, which means the total dissipation of everything that we have ever accomplished, every single one of us. And we have accomplished so much, not just in the past couple of years, couple of months, right? Couple of 100 years, but we're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, right? And it's important for us to recognize that. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. We everybody's talking about this is the worst times. This is the end of times. The world's going to blow up. We're going to war. We got volcanoes. We've got heat waves. This is catastrophe. This is the absolute worst. Hello, Tammy. And then in that contradictory way, in that optimistic way, because I realize, so much of what's going on is in our choices. And it is stepping out from one room and going into a next room, something totally unfamiliar. And I don't know why I'm referencing it as rooms, because if you guys know me, I should be referencing it as seasons, right? Because I love the outdoors so much. It's such a big part of me. And as much as this world wouldn't survive without the humans, right? The world, right, could easily be gone. And again, right, we have to be the stewards of where we wouldn't be without the world, right? Without the sun, without the hemisphere, the Milky Way, and black holes, and everything that we don't understand yet, because all of that is in a room up on a shelf somewhere, is where we haven't discovered it yet. Does that make any sense, you guys? Right? Change is always happening, and it's all in the way that I'm not going to say frame it, you know, this idea of reframing. I don't want to deny reality. You guys know I'm very much a realist. Like, I want to stay right here in the present, in the situation where I am, because I've spent so much of my life just forgetting about that problem, right? Oh my goodness, that's so scary. Oh, I can't deal with those bills. Let's just pretend and not look at my email, right? And maybe they'll go away. And I don't want to be that person to deny what's really going on in the human part of my existence, right? And that's the truth. And so I have to take, you know those sensible, those, like, how do you deny it kind of ideas. We were talking a little bit about the science yesterday, and we were talking about the Neanderthals and the Homo erectus and all those other humanoids that have been around for so long, right? And then how it ties in with our, right, religious beliefs, our spiritual beliefs, our scientific beliefs, cultural beliefs. And what about familial beliefs? Because a lot of these beliefs are just handed down from one generation to another, and it's taken as fact. I grew up in a household of somebody who loved Jesus. and somebody who loved outer space. Right? Even in their personalities and in the way they interacted with each member of our family. Like it was so extreme in its differences. And somehow, some way, my dad got it in his head that he was going to bring his family up with this idea of free choice, right? Not to say that that free choice was not influenced, right? Maybe manipulated a little bit, right? That we were like sheep in a big field, and right, they were the dogs, and just trying to get us where they felt that we needed to be or maybe deserved to be. But in our minds, each one of us felt like we had free choice. And outside of their directive, right, we truly did have free choice, because if we made those choices, how can you be in trouble for making those choices in a household that's been made to feel that they had free choice? There wasn't that. And I used to question that all the time growing up. You know, we talked a little bit about being an overeater when I was a kid and stuff. I would do some pretty silly things, and, I would get in like crazy, unbelievable experiences for not doing anything at all, for just existing, for just having people see me in the same room as them, right? And I would be totally dazed and confused and frustrated and scared, right? And probably extremely hypervigilant. And how can I calm this situation down? But there were times when I was right off the chart where I truly deserved to be in big doo doo, right? I deserved to get in trouble. I remember, as a teenager, my mother always had desserts for after dinner. We'd have our dinner, but she would bake something, cakes or cinnamon buns or right rice pudding, because lots of rice pudding growing up as kids, right? But there was always a dessert after dinner. And I used to remember flipping these cakes almost upside down. And they were able to go upside down because the icing would go like old fashioned homemade icing. It'd always go a little bit crunchy. So I was able to turn the cake upside down. This was dessert for dinner. And I would scoop out the entire inside of the cake and eat it, and then flip the cake back over. It was actually a hat by this point, but it looked perfectly framed. Perfectly framed. And, right, you would think, because that cake was for everybody at the dinner table, that when my mother cut into that cake, so there was nothing inside of it, it was just the frame of this hard icing that was holding the cake up. And I have no idea how I got in my head that I was going to get away with that, but I did, right? Now, that wasn't something I always did. I think I probably did it 2 or 3 times just because I knew, because it was my free choice that I did that. But it was a choice in doing something bad. I knew it was something bad. It was not just bad for me as being the little chubby kid that, right, wanted to eat the cake out, but it was the fact that it was a gift for everybody, right? It was a gift for absolutely everybody. And I didn't take anybody into consideration in that. And of course, after eating the inside of that cake, right? And she always covered it in coconut. It was always my favorite cake. My mother made just My mother was a great baker, right? And she'd make these beautiful cakes, but my favorite was her white cake with chocolate icing with the coconut all covered. I couldn't say no to that. Like, right? It was part of my coping mechanisms even as a child, that I was coping in these ways. And yeah, it is. You look at it now as an adult. I put myself in my shoes as a child and as a teenager, and I give myself a little giggle, like that's just that's just crazy town that I did it. But there's more in that story, because in putting myself in those shoes and going back into that time, right? Because I was so hyper vigilant, I didn't even give it any thought as to why I didn't get in trouble for tearing into the cake like that. That that it was just, oh my goodness, right? I'm not going to get in trouble, or I'm not going to get into a worse situation because I did something like that. You would think that I would find that curious, that I would delve into it a little bit deeper. It's only now as an adult that I recognize that it was probably because my dad raised us on free choice, and that was my free choice, right? And then in comparing that to, right, coming home and just stepping into crazy town and not knowing what it was for, what I had done, or how I could resolve it, right? That I just had to endure that I'm not going to say moment, because moments were sometimes very, very long, but endure that experience. There we go. Endure that experience, that it always felt like it was for nothing, because it was never explained, except for the fact that maybe I'd gotten on somebody's nerves. You know, I think a part of me understood that it was taking out their own frustrations. As an adult, I can appreciate where my mother was in her life, because she put up a lot with my dad, right? She was a good wife to him in that tolerance. But you know instead of making him pay for stuff, right, I ended up being the one in the receiving end of that frustration. And I think even back then I recognized that, because silly me, on the couple of times that I did recognize it, I called her on it. And that was the last thing you wanted to do with my mom. Right? It was, I don't even want to get into it, but I'm laughing about it now, because I can appreciate where she came from, right? That volatile part of her was just something that was passed down from one generation to the next. And that was her choice in that moment to do that. And so, just like me and carving out the inside of that cake, right? Which I didn't get in trouble for, like there was the same expectation, right, in what she did. Now, it's kind of a messed up way to think. Yes, right? There is no excuse to emotionally, mentally, or physically hurt your children, right? But sometimes, your children are representations of yourself, right? And you're only a representation of your parents and how you grew up. And when we talk about passing things down from one generation to another, it's that one person who says that's it, no more. Or, you know what? I get it. I understand. And, even though I didn't have children, that I had no way of having that experience to understand whether or not I would have been a good mom, I probably wouldn't have, right? There wouldn't have been that passing down, no 100%, because I had that loving, caring relationship with my father. So there was no way that I would have ever done to my children as to what had happened to me. But in saying that, I would have been an overcompensator. I would not have been a good mother because you can't give and spoil your children, because that's the word. It spoils them, right? It spoils them to the future. And so now you've just gone to the further extreme, and you've epigenetically passed something new down, right? Something new down. And then that starts getting passed along. And worse, right? Maybe I would have had some of those aspects of my mother in frustration, right? Right? But I would have had that mentality, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, right? And then kiss the boo boos and stuff. And that's got to be totally confusing for the children, too. Like, there's got to be some semblance of balance. And, I believe, with my father, he really meant well in that idea of free choice, right? It got me out of situations where I could have been deserving of those interactions that I had. But at the same time, right, I still would have had those other interactions where I was totally confused as to what was going on, right? And in the end, I've come to recognize, and it's taken a very long time to be able to sympathize and empathize with somebody who, like I said, crazy town, right? But there was a sadness, right? There was a real sadness in there. And I was not the only member in that family, but because my mother worked in archetypes and we all had our roles in that family, that it was easier to put me in another room, well, it might have been easier to put me in another room and up on a shelf. It would have been safer at the very least. But I was central in that family 100%. And, I'm very grateful for that balance that I had with my father, that, in those times where I was confused and I was hurt and I just didn't have anybody to turn to. I had my father to turn to, right? And even though I didn't share everything with him because he was sick, right? I was always under the assumption that any day that he could pass, and it was the last thing that I wanted was for that to be my responsibility. But that was part of the programming too. Messed up, right? Really messed up, but so grateful now. I watched the way that well, I have another sister who didn't have children, but my second youngest sister has had children, beautiful children, moving forward, right? My nephew and niece on her side have both woken up to some of these ideas and are beautiful parents, well adjusted, right? Well adjusted. And those children are growing up feeling loved. And a lot of those stuff that, I took on. right? Of the responsibility of holding and enduring. That my sisters didn't have to partake in any of that. And so they're not passing any of that stuff down, right? They're not passing. Yes, there's residue, right? It's like how a baby kitten gets born and knows automatically to go find the nippy and stuff, right? So there it is in the systems, but it only takes a couple of generations, and right? And it would just be getting better and better and better. And because I believe other parts of me, right, are going to show up somewheres down the line. Who's to say in this line, right, that I'm situated now, or maybe I'll be off in India, or right? Who's to say? This world is so expansive, things going on in this world that we're not even participants in. We just know a little bit. We only experience a little bit, but it's in the experiences that we get to feel ourselves out, to feel and understand what we're truly made of, and to be able, through our own choices, right? To be able, if we want to put ourselves in other people's shoes and really recognize that, it's true. Hurt people, right? But it's not something that has to be passed down from one generation to the next. And I think, over the course of the years, that I would be an amazing mom, right? And I could say that in this life, right? That opportunity may be gone. I say may be gone because technology is always changing, just like we are, right? And you never know in the future, from one day to the next, what's going to pop into our lives for us to experience, for us to endure, right? For us to understand, for us to reconcile with this, right? It would have been amazing if my mother had had a little bit more time to reconcile with her own existence in her life. My mother, right? She had adventures, she had good times, right? But sometimes in our lives, like I said, if you leave yourself open to the negative, all you're welcoming into yourself is negative, and you compound it, right? And my family was pretty lucky that me and my dad dropped into it to do a little bit of house cleaning. That's how I that's how I look at it. And I do, Tammy, have a good laugh at it, right? Because we're creating the best human beings we possibly can, so that in the future, those other parts of us are going to have an easy in and an easy out, right? And not just say easy in and easy out, but how about a joyful in, a joyful out, and not to be able to be frustrated and not to be angry and not to be, you know, oh, I'm never gonna get these things in my life, like, "Urgh," right? That it impacts us to the point where, right, we delve into those coping mechanisms, because those coping mechanisms have no problem keeping company with us, whether we're happy or we're sad. And like I said, either or, right? For me, being an overeater all my life, it was reward and punishment. That's the mix up. And, that might not be my expertise, my strength in overcoming. But you guys heard my talk yesterday, right? In taking into consideration that I have not been treating myself well in my physicality, right? I'd say I do pretty good in some aspects of what's been going on in my life. And I say better late than never, right? That in my physicality or in that taking care of this, I really didn't take care of this, right? And it's important for me to enjoy the ride, to enjoy what I'm doing, to feel comfortable, to feel optimistic. If one thing doesn't work out, something else will come across my path, bigger, maybe better, right? That whatever mishap comes into my life, that it's not the end of the world. It really isn't, because we learn the best in our struggles, right? Right? Anything worthwhile having, you have to work for, right? And in failing in what we're trying to reach out for in our dreams and our goals and stuff, that's hard work. And there's a lot of failure in there. There's a lot of missing the net, right? A lot of missing the net until finally you get it in the net just once. And maybe you're off the bench and on the field a couple of times, right? Until you become that expert, until you become that person that is worthy of that gold medal or that trophy or that accolation. You know the word I'm looking for. Right? So when I say riding the waves, a lot of it is riding the waves in each one of our lives. That's the way it is. And, lots of people, they don't like that. They don't appreciate that. They don't expect that. They expect something more. No mistakes, right? Everything to be sunshine and rainbows, cotton candy and sprinkles. And then you put one thing into their life that doesn't meet that criteria, then everything falls apart. Life is not worth living, right? And then again, you get yourself in that state, and what do you get? You get more negative. You get more house bills. You get less paychecks. And I have to say, I have been an experiencer in these past few years, and especially in the last year where I haven't even had a job, right? That I had to leave the job that I had. And it's been a year now. And in that year, I have been reselling, right? Which is reselling is when you go to garage sales and auctions and thrift stores and you buy things inexpensive and then you sell them for a little bit extra cash. It's what's been putting the groceries in my cupboard. It's been what's been paying the bills. And then you think that, oh, it's going good, but in that consistency and in those seasons, now we reference the outdoors, the seasons, that you find that, well, things aren't going as well as you thought. And sometimes that paycheck every 2 weeks looks mighty fine because you can budget, you know what's coming in, and you can kind of play with it. But then when you only know you have one little piece of consistent and the other is just when it shows up, right? That you have to learn to be dependable. You have to be kind of, what's the word I'm looking about? Not Scroogey, but careful with your money just to make sure that you don't lose the roof over your house, that you get to keep your phone and your internet and your lights going and groceries in the fridge and the cupboards. And look at me a year later, and I'm still here. I got a few groceries in the cupboard. I still have my phone. I still have my internet. I still have lights. Like, there's so much to be grateful in that. But there's also so much to recognize, like that couldn't have been all me, right? That there were little gifts brought across my path because of that optimistic attitude in the riding of the waves, in trusting that everything was going to be okay, right? Knowing that, today looks like this. I'm in this room today, but tomorrow I might be in a different room. And it might not even be the room that I want to be in, right? But I'm there. And so this is the way it is. And so you have to accept that and just be grateful that there's food in the cupboards and light bulbs, right? And that you can still smile through the difficulties, knowing it's through the difficulties that you'll eventually get that trophy, that gold medal, right? That trailer, towable car for your retirement, right? And who's to say if I truly ever retire? Because for myself, I'm so present in my life, right? It's kind of cool that, in this age of AI learning, I have found a place, I have found a home on YouTube, right? And who's to say what it's going to look like even in a year or 10 years from now? Because things are always changing, right? And it may look great and it may not, but it's in the experience that you're having and in setting those goals, right? And chasing down your dreams, right? What was that quote on my fridge? It's not about getting what you want. It's about appreciating the experience, the lessons, and the landscapes along the way. I kind of changed it a little bit. I've got it written down. It just sounded a little bit better when I just said it right now, right? But that is true. That really is true because we're humans, right? And in moving forward, it's a struggle. And there are lessons in the struggle. And if we can overcome the lessons, or if you could trust that we can get through those struggles, those lessons, that what we need, right? And maybe not what we want, maybe something even better, right? Will come across our path. There'll be little moments of relief, lift up, conversations, right? Assistance. And that's a truth. I've experienced that in my own life in the past year, like constant. And that was the lesson for me, right? Not to be just lazy and say, oh, I'm just going to wait for the handout to resolve the problem or whatever. It's about meeting it, not even halfway. I don't even have to meet it halfway. I just have to keep moving, right? I just put one foot in front of another and I just trust that everything is going to work out okay, right? Okay, you guys, let me come back here and say hi, hello, Tammy. Um, I have always been intrigued with the universe and outer space and the Milky Way and the black hole and the Bermuda Triangle that I started reading and studying them about 5 or 6 years on some. Wow, that's really neat. I remember I always found it curious about, well, not so much outer space. I would stare at the stars sometimes because my mother used to send me to Williams Lake in British Columbia on the holidays, right? and she'd make me go stay with my aunt. And I loved my aunt. She was pretty hard, right? She was a pretty hard lady, but she was very sweet, right? And she was very adventurous too. And at nighttime, I would go out to the field by myself, right? And I would sit in the field and I would just stare up at the sky, and the stars would be so tight together. Well, I guess living out in the country, you would know what I'm talking about. How it would look like the Milky Way, and it was pretty spectacular. And I could put my mind there, my imagination there instantly. But it really wasn't the place that my attention was at. It was always in the history, I think, for the most part, and also in adventuring. My dad was a big adventurer, and which is really odd for somebody with congenital heart failure. But he was an adventurer in life, and yeah, he took his family along for that ride, and it extended into my life. And I would have to say that was one of the greatest gifts that my father ever could have given me, was that love for the outdoors, because it shouldn't have been something, right? As an obese teenager, an adult, like, I should have been uh, a couch and a remote control kind of girl. I was that too, but I was for quite a while. But I was always a very active person in other aspects, even in the outdoors. Then, because like I said, it was something that I was brought up on. It was something I didn't know it at the time, that it was something that I needed. It was something that was probably guiding me along in my story a little bit, right? That it was a gift, and in all actuality, that gift led me to be sitting here right now in the indoors, right? In the indoors. I spend a lot of time here at my computer. I have goals, I have dreams. Right? This is the one-stop shop. Right? And it has been for years now. But I make sure to make a point to keep that connection, with my evening walks. I went for a long walk. I forgot the stewed tomatoes. I'm going to my sister's tomorrow to make Swiss steak for dinner. And I forgot to buy stewed tomatoes. I thought I had a can of stewed tomatoes in the cupboard, but I didn't. So I went to the store to get a can of stewed tomatoes. But it was so beautiful outside and so windy, and it felt so good. That it was hot outside, but that wind was so strong, it was just lovely to walk in. So I took the long route around, and I actually been looking for quite a while for a specific mansion in that neighborhood. um, and I still haven't found it. I thought I found it today because it was one of the very older houses on that street, but it turned out to be a different house. But in any case, I got myself lost in that one, in saying that, I went for a walk today, and it was absolutely beautiful. I took the long way, right? I could have cut through the lanes and been home in 2 minutes, but I just walked up. And then I walked down one street, and then I walked up again, just like snake my way home, because I wasn't ready to come home. But it was uh, a busy day for me. It was, and I was in my emotions during the day, because I did do a workshop today, like a mastermind, very kind, that I was able to sit in, and not have to, divvy out money that I didn't have, right? And it was just a thought leader out there that was doing a kindness for people. And yeah, it was pretty amazing to sit in. And it was somebody, I haven't been able to sit live with for a few years now. I used to do live shows every morning on Instagram for years, and I'd wake up and be ready to go whenever he did his live shows. And then, life gets busy, and everybody is growing, and changes in everybody's life, right? But sometimes, we're so me, that, right? We don't think that there's any excuses for people not to fulfill those needs that we have. And then somebody else making changes, quite often, we have to adjust in that too. Yeah, so it was pretty amazing. So it was a busy day for me too. Okay, I'm coming into the comments here. Okay. My doctor phoned me today too. Right in the middle of my master class too. So I had to get up and talk to my doctor. She's sending me some more tests. She's right. We're starting from the ground up. She wants all this information so she knows exactly what she's dealing with, right? But I like that she's so thorough in that too, right? So, yeah, pretty awesome. And I thanked her also. I asked my sister, I says, would it be appropriate to give her a thank you card? Because, like she caught the iron thing, which was pretty amazing as far as I'm concerned. And my sister said, no, that's her job. I went, oh, okay. But when she phoned today, I made a point at very least to say, thank you for being so on top of it, right? Yeah, because I have. When she mentioned the iron, I went into the right away to Gemini. I was asking all kinds of questions and everything, right? I appreciate my good health, right? But also, it's in my choices, right? And I wasn't making some good choices, and it made it so I needed some iron pills in that. But we course correct, right? We course correct, and in that process, we learn. And you can guarantee I'm not going to be doing that again. I'll be paying very close attention. And plus, it also woke me up. Like I said yesterday, that I appreciate that I recognize that I haven't been treating the physicality of myself as well as I should have. I explore the inside and the outside, but the outside is just not outdoors. That outside is also got to be, right? The physicality of myself too. So I appreciate that. Okay, come into the comments here. Um, Me too, Cindy. I always say I don't go looking for trouble, but trouble comes looking for me. Oh my goodness. Isn't that the case? Sydney, your cake story, your good laugh. Yeah. I laugh at it. I laugh at it now. I only did it a few times, but I was right. You're kids, you're young teenagers. We do silly things. And like I said, I've never denied the fact that we were feral kids, right? Right? That, you know, um, but it was kind of curious that the kind of things that I did get away with, and then the confusion in what did I do in other moments. But, it's in that preparedness for what's that saying? Expect the unexpected. Expect the unexpected. There's a good one. Um, Cindy, that is good that you had free choice with your father. In my world, I grew up in such a strict environment and home, we got zero choice. Yeah, see, we all got to grow into individuals. I do appreciate that, Tammy. Right? That I wasn't a carbon copy of either one of my parents in any way, that I had that opportunity to choose the good qualities of my mother for myself, right? Because my mother did have good qualities about her, and to pick the good qualities from my father, right? And leave the negative behind. But maybe I picked up some of that negative. That's what the shadow work is for, to peel all that stuff away that you picked up as truths. But to each one of us, we get to make those choices, right? And, from the stories that you've been telling in our conversations, Tammy, like you recognized and you became the parent for your children that you didn't get to have, right? And so epigenetically, they're not going to be passing these experiences down to their kids. And, that's got to be a good thing. And you know what? That's evolution. That's evolution. That makes for an amazing human being that those other parts of us would love to join forces with in the experience of a lifetime. And that's the truth, right? That's the truth. And we're at that stage in this world that we live in right now. That's a very strong possibility that we can maybe get there with the help of this generation of AI learning, right? I call it AI learning, but who's to say what it's going to be called, a year, 10 years, or decade from now, thousands of years from now, right? That this is an opportunity for all of us, but we have to choose it, right? I think some of us have been choosing very, very well. I really see that movement, and it's a good thing. It really is a good thing, even if people want to make it look like that it's the worst of times, right? No, it's the worst of times. It's the best of times. And you know what? When we're long, long gone, just like the generations before us, because I think that was Shakespeare, wasn't it? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And he's been gone a long time. And hundreds of years, thousands of years, that quote will still be around, referencing the moment that somebody is standing in. So, yeah, we have to appreciate it. Things are getting better, especially when you got such amazing people all around the world, and that we recognize that all around the world, that people that don't look anything like us, that don't believe in anything like we believe in, right? That don't raise their children, don't speak our languages, don't have those religious ideas, that we can appreciate that we can be friends and neighbors, and in our free choice, pick and choose the good and the bad that's suited for the life what we're living in the moment, right? So maybe you're right there, Tammy. Free choice is a good thing to look at, right? But there are bad aspects in that too. Like I said, we were feral kids. We were brought up by the television in the 60s and 70s. That was our babysitter growing up. And it's in the examples we have, right? And it's a little bit difficult now. I had both my parents growing up, right? My entire life until my father passed away. Yes, he didn't get to live to be an old man. He passed away when he was 47 years old. But by that time, I was already out of the house. I was already living my best life. So I thought. Right? So we have to appreciate that too, right? It gets better with every generation in our free choices, and as things move along, we get a little bit more comfortable and more unified as, just this town, or in my case, just this family, because we were a pretty isolated family, right? But just this town, just this city, just this province or state or country or continent, or maybe one day we'll say just this world, because we're dispersed out there all over the place. Who's to say what it's going to look like? It's just about having a curious mind, right? A creative mind, because we can create anything, like absolutely anything. Like you see what Elon Musk is doing with space right now. That's just crazy town, and that takes an imagination, but so many other skills too, like courage, right? Being able to generate money, to be able to hold your own and have your say when other people are contradicting everything that you're trying to do and everything you're trying to say. That's tough. And then also at the same time, create the best life for yourself as you possibly can. And that guy's doing pretty good. He's got 12 kids now. I think he's on number 13 now. You never know. He's out to populate the world, that guy. Okay, you guys, let's come down here. Uh, Cindy, I'm just trying to see where I left off. But that is one thing that I broke that chain. And in that aspect, I raised my kids differently in that way, right? It takes one, right? We are all just but one link, right? But you change that link, you separate yourself from that link, it does change. It changes everything, right? It does. And it can be changed for a good way, or it could be all hell's gonna break loose, right? But yeah, that's you're a good example of that. Cindy, in the time I have known you via YouTube channel here, I see you and hear you and observe you. I think you could be a good mom, mother in these times. I appreciate that you say that. Even in my way of thinking, you know, it is a curious mind that I have. That's for sure. But it's nice to have people that appreciate me for who I am. That is pretty incredible, and I thank you for saying that. That's pretty awesome. Um, I feel that through the years, Cindy, that you had people come to your pathways and help that person and guided them and helped them via your career jobs and workplaces and online through your channel. Right, and that's true. You get what you give in life, and that's the truth. And I've created some amazing relationships in all those years, and in the moment they might not be present in my life, but if I should bump into them in the street, big hugs and pick up just to see what we've missed in that span of not seeing each other. And yes, to be able to shine on people and shine on customers and shine on companies and you know it is pretty amazing, right? And people have shined in my life too, and so it's important for me to recognize that. Yeah. Okay. We haven't even gotten to the word yet. We're already at 10 o'clock here, you guys. Okay. Boo boo doo doo. Swiss steak. Swiss steak. My mother once in a while would make Swiss steak. It was good. I bet your Swiss steak is good that you cook, Cindy. It was my dad's recipe. My dad didn't cook many things, but Swiss steak was one of his go-tos when it was something he wanted to cook for dinner. And he didn't cook often because my mother did most of the cooking. But every once in a while, he decided to get behind the stove. And yeah, Swiss steak was one of his favorite recipes. I make it almost like he does, except I like French green beans and he uses green beans, right? But for me, it was always French green beans that I appreciated. Oh, which just reminded me, got to make sure that I get all my vegetables and put it in my backpack when I leave in the morning. They have to stay in the fridge, but there's no reason why I can't get them together. So I see them when I open up the fridge in the morning. Just a little mental check for me to do before we grab the card. Yeah, it was lots of fun. It was lots of fun. I felt bad. I had to get up a couple of times, but I have to push back at what pushes me. When you say, like trouble finds you, that's just the course of my world sometimes. But that's, you know, things that you got to ride the waves, right? You have to ride the waves in that, and things will come into your life all the time, and it's how you manage it in the moment, right? But it's not like I could not answer the phone. I thought about it. I looked at the phone and I saw it was my doctor, and then I said, "But I'm in, I'm in a workshop." And then I says, "I better take this call." So I just kind of got up and I went off because we're on Zoom, right? So I just took my call, made sure I got the information I needed to get off, and then I was just back to what I was doing. You like my cake story, do you? I like Elon Musk. He's so intelligent and a genius, really, and one of a kind person. Yeah, I heard that he's so rich now that if he wanted to, he could give $1 million. Oh no, $1 billion to every single person on this planet. Would that be crazy? He could give $1 billion to everybody on this planet. Crazy idea. When I heard that, I says, "Oh my goodness, he should put it in his will, right? That everybody gets $1 billion." Can you imagine how busy the lawyers would be in dispersing that inheritance? That would be crazy. Okay, you guys, let's quickly go into a card, and we'll just go into it for a few minutes tonight. If you don't know, 54 powerful words. Sometimes they're pertinent to the conversation, sometimes they're not. We just go off on something else in the moment. And that's the way it goes. So the word we have tonight is, ah, it is pertinent to the conversation. We got the word, thumbnail. Flexibility always allows us to stretch out from where we are comfortable. That is so true. You guys hear that saying all the time, get out of your comfort zone, right? It's because in that practice, in reaching for your goals, or, going for the Olympics or that trophy, that we do get better. But you can't just get to the end of stage one and go, amazing, trophy, please, get me into the Olympics. That's not the way it works, because it's just you're in your comfort. You're comfortable. You got stage one down packed. Now you got to get to stage two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. It never stops. It never stops. And it's to understand, once you get comfortable, that's the best time to throw a wrench into your own life, right? Because if there are plans for you to move, right, life takes us, right, dictates that change into our lives, and gives us those 360s, right, those 180-degree turns, right? But if you make that move yourself, make just a little 45-degree turn when it's time to stretch, right? And that 45-degree turn is just the extra effort, right? Just that energy and that action into something that you really want, right? Because there's nothing like the feeling of earning what you achieve in comparison to just having it handed out to you. I lived that way for a very long time, and I appreciate in those moments when it does come across my path. But now it feels so much better because I feel more deserving in it, right? Even though I don't physically earn it, like that $50 bill I found on the street last week. That was pretty awesome. Was that last week? Yeah, that was pretty cool when I did that. Flexibility allows us to stretch out from where we are comfortable. And that's the truth. But that flexibility also comes from our choices, doesn't it? Because we have to be active in that. We have to expand in order to bring about change. And when I say that, like, even when you're laying on the couch with the remote control, you still have to get up, to the fridge to get that can of beer, right? Otherwise, you're not going to get that can of beer. And you're going to feel that you're suffering in that. That's a bad analogy. Just it's a bad analogy, but it is true, right? When you start feeling comfortable at where you're at, that's the most perfect time to introduce some change into your life, right? You finish one project, don't go, oh, that's so great, right? Of course, reward yourself. Go to the beach, right? Go to a movie. Make yourself a nice dinner. Watch your favorite television show. But get right back at it, right? Because it's in that sense of accomplishing that we're going to reach that goal, right? Win that gold medal. Get that trophy, right? Just keep riding the waves, adapting and conquering, one foot in front of another. And then it won't feel like you're budging somebody off the couch with the remote control because you're always moving forward, right? One step in front of another. Okay, you guys, that's all I've got for you tonight. It has been a day for sure. Uh, Last week, Cindy, that I found that $50 bill. Yeah, when I was riding the bike. Yeah, that was so cool and it was so neat. It was just the perfect timing. I was enjoying, and it was my mindset too, because I was enjoying my bike ride so much, and I was enjoying the trees and the smell of the rain on the grass and everything. And it was just a perfect moment to look down and go, oh my goodness, is that what I think it is? And it turned out to be a $50 bill. You can't miss the Canadian $50 bills because they are pink. They're bright fluorescent pink, right? Yeah, you can't miss those bills. Hello, Eugene. Hello, Eugene. You just popped in just as I'm ending my live, and we're not too late. I think we're almost as at on time as when I usually leave. You guys, that's my good cheer. Thank you for coming in, and we'll see you